Coral sat back in his command chair with his arms folded as he looked out at the view before him. The display on his flagship showed Earth a world overflowing with life, wild and unrestrained. The Galactic Council had ordered him to study this unpredictable species that called itself human. He had witnessed the rise and fall of countless societies, but never before had he encountered one so seemingly unready. The Asterians always valued structure and precision. Their war-driven culture was based on firm rules, clever tactics, and a serious attitude toward war. They had overpowered species much stronger and far more developed than humans could ever imagine becoming. So when the Council sent Coral to examine Earth, he had assumed it would be another, simple victory. But what he witnessed was far from expected. Coral looked down at the human troops below, who were lounging around completely relaxed. Some were asleep, some eating, and others just sitting and talking. The absence of urgency was a clear difference from the strict and alert settings. Coral was familiar with the humans wore no standard gear, nor did they carry weapons in any proper fashion. Some had odd clothing, while others drank what Coral had learned was called coffee. Practiced Coral had no understanding of he had been informed about the human fascination with this drink made of heated water and roasted seeds, often combined with flavors that to him seemed pointless. He watched them sip this drink unaware or unconcerned about the seriousness of the coming battle. He could not comprehend it. These were meant to be fighters, he thought, but surely not acting like this, not just sitting around casually drinking from cups as if expecting a casual meeting. Coral narrowed his eyes, studying their faces. None of them looked scared, not even uneasy. They actually seemed to be enjoying themselves in clear contrast to his own troops, who were already readying themselves for a swift and clean victory. His forces, wearing flawless uniforms and carrying honed weapons, were preparing for what Coral always expected, a brief and controlled strike. But what he saw now was nothing like any pre-battle routine he had witnessed before. He focused on one man. In the distance, sitting with a mug in hand, laughing with his fellow soldiers, their voices faint through the ship's dampeners, but he could hear them joking about things that had nothing to do with the coming battle. This man with unkempt hair and plain clothes looked up, meeting Coral's eyes. Coral paused. The human didn't look away or show fear. Instead, he lifted his mug in what Coral would later describe as a taunting toast, and smiled. The boldness of this human tightened Coral's gut. Was this mockery or ignorance of the danger they were in? Or was it something deeper? Suddenly, the battle alarm echoed through the air, snapping Coral from his thoughts. The humans still hadn't flinched. Not one of them looked concerned yet. The second the alert sounded, they all rose together, moving in perfect coordination that caught Coral off guard. It was like they understood something he did not. He couldn't explain it, while his own troops rushed to their places, weapons at the ready, eager for blood. The humans were already prepared in a way that defied everything Coral believed, decimate whatever stood in their path. But the humans did not even raise their voices. They moved together like a perfect machine, yet without the pressure, without the fear, without the icy discipline Coral had come to expect. Then the first wave hit. The Asterians surged forward, their laser rifles shining with deadly accuracy, and Coral was right there at the front, leading his warriors as they stormed through the human defenses. He had full faith in their power to crush this uprising. The enemy was too slow, too weak, but then the humans struck back, and Coral's confusion shifted into something far more intense. They didn't fight. Like trained soldiers, they fought like beasts, raw, untamed, driven not by orders but by something deep inside. Each movement was filled with fury, with reckless abandon. Coral had never seen anything like it in any of the races he had studied. These humans didn't just fight to survive, they seemed to enjoy it. One of them leapt onto the back of an elite Asterian, slicing deep into his neck. The Asterian collapsed, and the human twisted the blade, a grin creeping across his face as he mumbled, "Got one," like he had just caught a ball. Coral's stomach turned. This was not what he expected humans were supposed to be. delicate, soft. But here they were in the thick of it, ripping through his finest soldiers like it was sport. They didn't fall. Back they didn't cry out in fear. They were laughing. One charged into battle, smashing an Asterian aside with just his shoulder, and kept moving without slowing down, stabbing another through the side faster than Coral's eyes could follow. Then came that laugh, loud and wild, across the field. A human, standing over a fallen Astarian, tossed his gun aside and pulled out a blade, his face lit with excitement, like he was enjoying every second. "We're having fun now," he shouted, eyes burning with something Coral couldn't understand. Everything Coral believed, everything he had learned told him. This was impossible. Humans were meant to break to run to beg, but these humans, they were thriving in the madness. They didn't see this as combat. They saw it as some sort of thrilling contest. Coral's thoughts became tangled. There was something unnatural about this race, something far more threatening than their weapons or numbers. The battle continued, and piece by piece, Coral's army began to collapse. It was really happening. The humans were winning. Coral could barely accept it. His elite forces, once sharp and flawless, now falling apart, his troops dropping as the humans struck with no pause and no mercy. Coral tried to rally. "Them!" He shouted orders through his comms, but it didn't matter. His soldiers were retreating, and the humans pushed forward without stopping as the fight ended. Coral stood in the middle of the destruction, the once clean battlefield, now a mess of blood and wreckage, both Asterian and human bodies everywhere, but the outcome was undeniable. The humans had won. Coral stared as the surviving humans came together, their voices lifted in laughter. Not sorrow. They did not mourn. They did not bow their heads. Instead, they cheered, they embraced, they joked in the middle of the death and chaos. Coral felt something grip his chest, a sensation he hadn't known in years. Fear, and when he returned to the Galactic Council, he was a changed man. His words were clear, sharp, and deeply unsettling. They were unlike any other species I have ever seen. They did not show fear. They were laughing and calmly drinking coffee. The council, which had once spoken with certainty about the weakness of humanity, now sat in silence, every member gripped by the weight of. Coral's report, what they had mistaken for weakness, was something entirely more dangerous. The humans had no fear. They didn't fear war. They didn't fear death. Coral's last log entry captured the horror he had witnessed. They are not what? We believe there is more, much more, and they are coming. The Galactic Council sat frozen, each one silently absorbing the impact of what Commander Coral had just revealed. Coral stood before them, his stance stiff, his face marked by the trauma he had lived through. He had faced death many times before, but never like this. Never from beings so seemingly unready, yet so devastating. The Council was used to hearing from generals about alien enemies, their capabilities, their tactics, and how best to defeat them, but no one had ever spoken of a race like this. No one had predicted what humans would be capable of on the battlefield. The doubt that had once crept into Coral's voice had now become certainty. Humanity was not a joke, Commander. Coral. The voice came from Counselor Callus, a senior member known for his calm, cold way of handling both war and diplomacy. You claim the humans fought with happiness. Coral's hands curled into fists as the images filled his mind again. The laughter, the calmness while surrounded by death, it stirred something deep within him. They fought like wild things. Coral answered. They were not fighting to survive. They were enjoying it. They embraced it. There was no pause, no hesitation, no fear. Only the hunger for more. The council members glanced at each other uneasily. This was not the species they had dismissed. Earth had been marked as weak, primitive, and unworthy of concern, but Coral's account shattered that illusion. Counselor Callus leaned forward, his gaze sharp and focused on Coral. And you are certain you witnessed this yourself? Coral didn't hesitate. I saw it. I survived it. and I have never seen anything like it before." Soft whispers rippled through the room as the council debated. Behind measured tones, what this revelation meant, Earth had already been chosen for complete cleansing its minerals, and resources were seen as essential for the survival of the greater galaxy, and the human population viewed as too reckless to be left alone. But now everything was uncertain. The plan had always been simple: destroy Earth, remove the threat, extract the value. But now the council faced something they had not predicted. Humans might not just resist, they might relish the fight. Councillor Cowis finally broke the silence. "We will not change the final order. The purge will go forward, but our strategy must be revised. If Coral is right, then speed and force are essential." Coral shook his head slowly. "You still don't understand. The purge won't succeed. Not with them. They'll fight harder than anything you've ever faced." Callus allowed a slight smirk to cross his lips. "I understand your concerns, Commander, but the Council cannot risk instability. Humanity must be removed." Coral felt the pressure of their decisions sink into his chest. He had seen the fire in the humans, the strange power that came not from technology or numbers, but from something much deeper and more dangerous than anyone here could imagine. "They are not like us," Coral said at last. Muttered more to himself than to anyone else in the room, "We fight to survive. They fight because it is part of who they are." The first wave of the purge came without warning. Ships cut through the skies, slicing. The atmosphere like blades, the human forces were not ready for this level of invasion. Earth's military had grown over 100 years, but it could not stand against the sheer power of the Galactic Council's assault. But Coral and the Council had made a critical mistake. They had misjudged how humans would respond. They had expected fear. They had expected people to break down, to run, to cry out for mercy. But what came instead was something far more dangerous. Chaos. Not panic, not disorder, but a kind of controlled madness. The second the first Asterian ship landed, humans rushed from cover, weapons raised, eyes filled not with fear, but rage. They didn't run, they didn't hide. They attacked, they charged the invaders like they had been, waiting their whole lives for this moment. They didn't move like a trained force. They moved like a storm, wild, fast, and unstoppable. It was raw, violent, and savage. Coral watched it all from his command post, trying to make sense of the madness below. He had seen humans fight before and dismissed them as weak and scattered. But this was different. They were moving with purpose, driven not by orders, but by something deeper and darker. They were not aiming to win, in the traditional sense. They were feeding on the battle itself. They wanted the blood, the destruction, the sensation of unleashing their fury, and even worse, they were succeeding every second that passed, pushed the Asterians back. Their advanced weapons and armor were useless. Against the humans' unpredictability, groups of soldiers attacked from every direction, striking hard and vanishing before they could be countered. The air exploded with noise, gunfire, shield bursts, and screams of pain. Coral barked orders into the comms calling for retreat, but it was already collapsing. Humans had broken past every defensive line. They were storming the command center. They were everywhere like shadows turned real. The battlefield had shifted from conflict to massacre, and the Asterians were on the losing end when the dust settled and the battle was done. Earth was no longer the same planet. It was a scarred ruin filled with the wreckage of war. The Asterian fleet lay broken in massive impact zones, twisted metal. Smoking under dark skies, there were no survivors. Coral looked around and saw human soldiers standing proud. Their uniforms bloodied their faces marked with exhaustion, but their eyes still gleamed. They hadn't won because they were more powerful. They had won because they embraced the violence in a way the Asterians never could. They loved war. Coral stood amid the shattered remains of what was once his fleet, surrounded by the fallen. With disbelief written across his face, he had come expecting weakness. He had come expecting surrender. What he had found instead was a nightmare. Humanity was not just another enemy. They were a storm. They were a force he could never control. He had misunderstood them, and now it was over. Carl gazed at what remained of the battlefield, his hands slick with sweat. Despite the icy wind, the earth around him was torn apart. Craters scattered across the land, twisted wreckage littered with bodies. His soldiers, once full of confidence, now gone. The rest had fled, trying to escape back to their ships in panic. Did not change, but the sharpness in his eyes deepened. Underestimated? He repeated slowly, as if testing the weight of the word. Carl gave a single nod. We thought they were primitive, disorganized, weak, but that is not what we found. Earth was a trap, not in its defenses or technology, but in its people. They did not fight for peace or protection. They fought because they wanted to, because it gave them purpose, and they reveled in it. Silence fell again, but this time it was heavy, tense. Even dangerous Counselor Callus took a step forward, his voice cold and precise. You were given overwhelming force. You had the advantage. You had the element of surprise, yet you failed. Carl didn't flinch, but he could feel the invisible weight of judgment crushing him. I led the invasion with full confidence, he said. But the humans don't respond to force the way we expected. Their strength is not in weapons or numbers. It's in their spirit. And that spirit is built for war. They do not break. They do not bend. They become something else entirely, something terrifying. One of the other counselors leaned in. You make them sound like monsters. Commander Carl turned his gaze toward her, his voice low and grim. They are not monsters. They are something worse. They are natural at war, born in it, molded by it. They do not fight because they have to. They fight because it is who they are. And I fear we have awakened something we cannot put back to sleep. The council chamber buzzed with hushed whispers. Now the once unwavering certainty of Earth's purge beginning to fracture under the weight of Carl's report. Callus narrowed his eyes and asked, Then what would you have us do, Commander? Retreat? Surrender? Carl straightened his shoulders. No. I suggest something far more difficult. Understand them, study them, fear them for what they are, and never ever underestimate them again. If we continue this war, the way we have it will not be Earth that falls. It will be us. A silence stretched across the chamber, one more oppressive than any battle Carl had ever faced. And as the Galactic Council sat in that moment weighing the truth of his words, they each began to feel something rare, something cold, something unwelcome, fear. Because for the first time in generations they had encountered a species not bound by fear of death or need for conquest, but by something deeper, something more dangerous. The humans were coming, and they were already enjoying the war. Carl turned from the chamber in silence, the council's decision ringing in his ears, the word purge echoing again and again like the toll of a funeral bell. He had told them. The truth warned them, begged them, but pride had already sealed their fate. They still believed they could control the outcome, that they could erase a species born from chaos with numbers and firepower. But Carl knew better. He had seen it up close and felt it in his bones. You cannot kill a storm by pretending it is just weather. You cannot silence thunder with orders, and you cannot conquer a species that was forged in war. As Carl walked through the cold, silent corridors of the command spire, he didn't see enemies anymore. He saw inevitability. He saw the truth, that humanity wasn't insane. They were focused, not disorganized, but free. They were driven not by fear, but by something deeper, something older. The council thought they still held the reins of fate, but Carl had watched those reins burn on the battlefield. He had seen human soldiers drenched in blood, laughing in the smoke of their dead. They weren't defending Earth. They were declaring it. They were showing the galaxy. What came next? Earth had not been invaded. The galaxy had been warned. and far beyond the ashes of the first failed purge, the humans were rising not to survive, not to recover, but to strike back with unity, with fury, with joy. They would not wait. They would not hesitate. They would come like fire, and they would burn everything in their path. Carl paused at the edge of the docking bay, eyes fixed on the stars, the wind cold against his face, but his heart colder still. He had failed to stop the purge, but he had seen what others. Hadn't they are coming not to defend but to invade?